Hi, I'm Madison and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my top 10 books of 2022. I'm so excited to give you guys my top 10 books 2022. This is romance, fantasy, anything in general that I read this year. These are just my top 10 books in general. There's no particular order to these. To be quite honest, I sat here for like 20 minutes trying to figure out what the last book was that was going to be in my top 10, and I still don't know if I made the right decisions. It was very hard. I don't know. I hate top 10s. I love them, but I hate them at the same time. You know, it's an odd relationship. And so I'm actually going to be starting this list with a book that I think is pretty obvious to be on my top 10 books of 2022, and that is House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. Are we surprised? No, we are not. I have a reading vlog dedicated to this. I also have an entire Sarah J Maas crack theory video as well, and they are my favorite videos that I have filmed to date. This book was such a wild ride. I had so much fun reading this. I tabbed the absolute crap out of it. I am so excited for the next book. Overall, I adore the shit out of this, so it had to be on this list. Next, we have a book series overall, but I kind of wanted to lump them all together. I didn't just want to recommend the fourth book in this series, but overall, oh my god, my hair is on this. That is going to be the *ᴛɪධᴛᴏᴅ Princess series by Raven Kennedy. Oh my god, I love this special editions that I got. Anyway. Oh, they're so pretty. I've only had these for a little while now, and every single time I take them out, I'm just like, oh, they're so gorgeous. Anyway, this series has become one of my new favorite fantasy romance series that I have ever read. This is up there with my love of Sarah J Maas, is the *ᴛɪධᴛᴏ Princess series by Raven Kennedy. And I will say flat out, if you love Sarah J Maas, please do check out this series because it has a lot of similarities to the Throne of Glass series, in my opinion, but a lot darker, and it ends up being a lot smuttier than the Throne of Glass series is. Now, this series does not get steamy or spicy or smutty until book 3 in it, and please do know that there is a huge trigger warning in this series for book 1 having an on-page rape scene. Not of the main character, but of someone else, but that still is in there, so please do be aware of that before you go into it. Now, the *ᴛɪධᴛᴏ Princess series is very hard to explain because of the fact that the series changes drastically with each book that comes out, and as more things are revealed to you as the reader. But at its core, this series follows Oren, and she is the gold-plated prisoner. And she is that because she is under the rule of King Midas. She is King Midas's prisoner, basically, and she is gold touched. So he touched her and turned her into a golden woman, basically. And this is a story where she ends up getting kidnapped by an enemy kingdom and where things go from there. That is all I will say. I highly, highly recommend this series. It is so cool, and I love seeing how far this series has come and how far Oren's journey has come, because she has so much Stockholm Syndrome in the beginning of this as King Midas's prisoner and kind of looking up to him as her savior, and kind of how she becomes this really, really strong character out of it. And it has just such a special place in my soul, and I was able to connect so dearly and deeply with Oren, and she's a character that you just keep on rooting for, and it's just super unique, and I really, really honestly do recommend this series. Where would I be without recommending Haunting Adeline, The Cat and Mouse Duet by H.D. Carlton? I know, no one's surprised that this happened, are they? I also have a very dedicated reading vlog to this duet, so please do check that out if you want to see more of my experience reading this. It has no spoilers in it. The Cat and Mouse Duet, it took over my life. I was so surprised by how much I love this. I still need to go back and actually tab my edition. I was so surprised at how much I love this duet. I was a little bit afraid when I first went into it because everyone did say this is the darkest romance book that does exist, and I will say I have read darker than this now. This was so much fun, and I became so enraptured in it, and even though they are this series is 2 500-page books, they are so bingeable, and so you become so enamored and so immersed in this world, into this romance. It is just like catnip. You can't stop reading it. So The Cat and Mouse Duet follows Adeline and Zaid. Now, Adeline is a author, and she's just moved back to her hometown to live in her grandma's house that was left to her in the will. And she one day ends up finding a rose in her house and realizes that she is being stalked by someone. And then Why does it sound so bad? And then you have Zaid. And Zaid is a vigilante anti-hero, basically. He runs this massive anonymous hacker group who works to basically save women and children from trafficking. At the same time, he also becomes obsessed with Adeline when he meets her and proceeds to stalk her. And it is their romance. Now, it is a lot more than just a stalker romance, and I know that, you know, this story is really unique in the fact that it kind of starts off very full force in their romance as a very, very dark romance and as a stalker-stalkee kind of relationship, but the way that it progresses was something that really caught me off guard, and I became really in love with not just Adeline as a character, but Zaid as well, and kind of the way that their relationship progresses and how absolutely, like, while it is messed up, it is actually a very pure romance at its core, and it is so raw and real and just absolutely beautiful. Like, the second book in this series is very hard to read, and I would say a lot of the trigger warnings for this series really do come from the second book because of the fact that there is on-page rape and sexual assault of our heroine in the second book. So please do be aware of that, and please do take all the trigger warnings for this series seriously. I also just love the shit out of Sibby. Sybil is like one of my favorite characters that I've read of all time. Sibby is from Satan's Affair, and that is, if you do decide to read the Cat and Mouse duet, please make sure you read Satan's Affair beforehand. It is the prequel novella, and it adds a lot more to the series, and I think it makes it a lot more fun when you do read it beforehand. Now, please do be aware Satan's Affair is nuts. It is one of the craziest things I've read in my entire life. I've never read anything so just bloody when it comes to sexual intercourse in my entire life. Like, like flat out, she is murdering a person and gets off on it. So do be aware of that when it comes to Satan's Affair. But Sibby is one of my favorite characters I've ever read, and I was so caught by surprise by that because she is so unique and she's so out there, and my girl, she was amazing. She was absolutely amazing, and when you see her in this series, it just makes your entire life so much better, and she was freaking phenomenal, and I love her to death. If you are a dark romance lover and you have not read this book series, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? If you love dark romance, you absolutely have to read this series. Oh wow, there's actually a lot of series that I'm recommending overall, but like I just recommended the Cat and Mouse duet, I'm also going to be recommending the Lola and the Millionaires duet. Now, I had a lot of options with where I was going to go with this, but I ultimately decided to go with Lola over Baby just because Lola's duet was so... I cried. I cried like a child. I bawled my eyes out when I read this because Lola's story is one that I very heavily relate to, and it hit a lot of my own things that I've personally gone through in life, and what she goes through in this is something that very much mirrored my own personal struggles, and because of that I was able to fall so deeply in love with this story and connect so deeply with it. And I was so thankful for the way that Catherine Moon kind of approached Lola and Lola's story in her duet, and it just meant the absolute world to me. So Lola and the Millionaires is an Omegaverse duet. Now, you had to know there's going to be some Omegaverse somewhere on this list because Omegaverse is one of my new favorite subgenres of everything and anything. I love the absolute crap out of Omegaverse. If you don't know what Omegaverse is, I have a whole introduction video on an intro to Omegaverse, so please check that out if you are curious. So in this you're following Lola, and Lola is a beta, and she always wanted to be an Omega, and she was always really sad that she was a beta until some things end up happening where she ends up getting very hurt, and she now no longer trusts alphas at all, and so she's kind of become a bit of a shell of herself, and she's just started working at this new magazine company which she's really excited about. And one night she goes to a bar and she meets this beta, and her and this beta hit it off. She's really excited at this perspective, the opportunity to be in a relationship with this guy, until she finds out that he is part of a pack with these other really high-ranking alphas, and she gets really freaked out by that until she meets these alphas, and she also feels a connection with them as well, and that also freaks her out, except for the fact that these guys really want to be with her, but she is afraid of being with them because of her past trauma with alphas. And so this is her relationship with that pack, with the beta, with the alphas, also the Omega in the pack, attack, and it's really beautiful. It's a really gorgeous story. I absolutely adored the crap out of it. There is also a subplot of this of, you know, the alphas that hurt her in the past kind of coming back to track her down again and to kind of kidnap her, and that's a whole subplot that is kind of going on as well through this, so it does have a little bit of suspense as well, and I just absolutely adore it. It's one of my favorite Omega verses that you can read, so I highly recommend it. Next we have The Pool Boy by Nikki Slime. Oh my god, this is one of the spiciest books I read this year, and I devoured the shit out of it. So you got Erica and Troy. Now Troy is Erica's best friend's son. He is like in his early 20s and he is Erica's pool boy. Now Erica is 42, she is recently divorced, and she's just trying to really move on with her life, and the two of them end up starting up a very hot and heated relationship. It is absolutely the hottest thing you will ever read in your entire life. There is like a 20-ish year age gap between the two of them. She's also a music producer and he is a secret aspiring musician as well. So there is also that kind of as a plot line as well. They are one of my favorite couples I have ever read. Troy has always been in love with her, he's been in love with her for years, and the way that he's so devoted and the way that he is so in love with Erica is one of the best things. Like, he literally fawns over her and treats her like she is an absolute goddess. It is so aspirational. You read this and you're like, I want a Troy in my life. Where is my Troy in life? Where is my man who is literally going to worship the ground that I walk on to such an amazing extent? Like, this boy and everything that he does is just so swoon worthy. I swear to the gods, it is amazing. It will blow you away. And if you are looking for something that will get you out of a reading slump, check this one out, because this one got me out of a reading slump. So that tells you a lot. Now, since we're on the topic of reading slumps, I have another book that I recently read at the end of 2022. I read it in November, and I'm putting it on this list because it got me out of a reading slump. I had read, I think, 3 or 4 books that just were not working for me. I was really worried that, like, you know, nothing was gonna work for me and I was just gonna end up in a serious reading slump and just gonna yeet myself off a cliff. But that was not the case, because I read Find Me by Ashley Rustack. This is the first book in her Witsex series. The Witsex series is not complete yet. The 4th book does come out this year, but this was amazing. It is a new adult Why Choose romance series, and you are following Shiloh. Now, a year prior to when the book starts off, her entire family is murdered by her stalker, and Shiloh ends up surviving. And so Shiloh goes into the Witsex program. She goes to Antarctica, or like Antarctica. She goes to Alaska. Alaska and Antarctica are not the same thing. She goes to Alaska for a year, and she ends up having to repeat her senior year of high school because of the fact that she was in Alaska for a year in hiding. So she's now 19, she's doing her last year of high school in Arizona, and when she moves into her house, she ends up meeting her 4 next door neighbors, who are these 4 really hot brothers, and she ends up starting a romance with those 4 brothers. Now, nothing really happens too much in this first book with the relationship. It's really her getting to know the guys, them getting to know her, and all of her traumas, because she has a lot of PTSD from her, you know, family being murdered. She's also covered in scars, and she has all these nightmares to the extent that, you know, her neighbors do hear her nightmares, including one of the brothers who is like, hi, nice to meet you. I hear you every night screaming. And she's like, oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Goodbye. And I love the shit out of it. It is so much fun. This was just such a bingeable, really cool series. If you love anything by Tate James, definitely do check this out. It is one of the book series that has actually been able to hold a candle to the Madison Kate Quartet, which I found to be very difficult for people to do, but this definitely comes very, very close. So please do check this out. Since I just talked about a book that I read towards the end of the year, I'm also going to talk about a book that was actually my last book that I read of 2022 that I'm actually going to be putting in my top 10. And this is the reason why I never pre-film my top 10, is because this always happens every single year. In the last week of the year, I read a book that is a 5-star that ends up being in my top 10 every time. And this time, that book is Losers Part 1 by Harley LaRue. Now, if you're wondering, Madison, will Losers Part 2 by Harley LaRue be in your top 10 of 2023? Yeah, Yeah, it will be. Spoiler. This book was so good. I loved it. Look at my tabs. Hang on. Can we just take a second to appreciate how beautiful those all look? So Losers Part 1 takes place after The Dare by Harley LaRue. This is a very short Halloween erotica novella. If you have not read it, please do check it out. But The Dare takes place, you're following Jessica Martins, and she was in high school the popular girl. She was the queen bee, she was the head cheerleader, and her boyfriend was the quarterback, the head guy, the football team. They were like, you know, the couple. They were prom king, prom queen. And they would always pick on these 4 guys who were the losers, except for the fact that Jessica always felt somewhat of a connection to those 4 guys. And The Dare takes place during college when Jessica comes back to town during like her freshman year, and she comes back to town for Halloween weekend, and she ends up attending a Halloween party in her hometown, and that's where she sees Manson again. Now Manson is kind of like the head guy of the 4 losers, and the 2 of them play a game of beer pong, but it's like dare pong, where you have to do a dare whenever someone sinks the cup and drinks it. And so at the end of the tournament, Jessica ends up losing completely to Manson and ends up being dared to be like his like sexual servant for the night. And that is what this is about. It's about her kind of submitting and being Manson's submissive for the night. And this takes place 2 years after The Dare, after college, when Jessica has come back to her hometown because she has a remote internship and she's trying to save up enough money to eventually move away from her hometown. But when she gets there, her car breaks down and she ends up meeting Manson and the 3 guys again, who are Jason, Lucas, and Vincent. And they actually run an auto mechanic shop, and when she goes to get her car fixed by them, she enters into another agreement with them, and that is the fact that she will pay back for her new car because her engine is kaput. She'll pay basically back the engine and all the fees by being their submissive for an entire month. That is what this is about. It is very much a duet that follows Jessica kind of letting go of her reputation. She's always kind of felt like she has to be the popular girl, like she has to put up this facade and be someone that is so beloved by everyone, and she's so afraid of not meeting everyone's expectations. And so it's kind of a story in twofold. It's a story about her finally letting go of her reputation, of her just kind of exploring these really dark sexual cravings that she does have with these 4 men, and kind of entering up into a relationship with the 4 of them. At the same time, it's about these 4 guys who have always wanted to be with Jessica, and this very like toxic relationship they have had with her for years, with her bullying them and they're kind of bullying her back, and them now actually having like an actual legitimate pure romance. And it is absolutely phenomenal. Like, it is so hard to put this series into words. I'm really struggling with it, to be quite honest, because a lot of this series does kind of revolve around dom-sub relationships, and kind of dom-sub relationships not just in the bedrooms but also out in the world as well. And I mean, Jessica is a brat, but it's kind of her relationship with these 4 men and how she can kind of become her true self with them. This isn't a white shoes romance. This is actually a fully polyamorous relationship between all 5 of them. All I will say is I freaking love this series. I highly recommend it if you like dark and smutty books. Please do check this out. And yeah. Next we have a book that I read at the very beginning of 2022, and I feel like a lot of the times you tend to forget the books that you read at the very beginning of the year, because I read almost 150 books in 2022, so the books you read at the very beginning tend to kind of lose steam towards everything else. But there was a book I read at the very beginning of 2022 that I absolutely have to recommend because it is one of my favorite books from this author. And so I had to put on this, I just had to include it, and that is The Bully by Sophie Lark, of course. This is also the first time that I really read a bully romance and really understood what that meant. The Bully by Sophie Lark is book 3 in the Kingmakers. This is Dean and Kat's romance, and it is about the 2 of them. They have a bully romance, but also a romance that is her agreeing basically, wow, this is actually very similar to The Losers in a sense. She agrees to be his submissive due to a blackmail situation, and so that is kind of what this one here revolves around. The Kingmaker series overall is a mafia romance series. Kingmakers is a university where all the mafias pretty much send their children to attend university to learn a very specific set of skills. It takes place after the Brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark, I do recommend you read all of Sophie Lark's books in order. If you are at all curious about Sophie Lark, I have an entire video that is dedicated to explaining Sophie Lark, her different universes, and the ways that you can read her. So please do check that out up above, because I'm not going to go too much into detail about what this book is about otherwise. This has got some of the best spicy scenes as well that I've ever read in my entire life. Also some of the most unique spicy scenes as well. And I highly recommend that you read this series because it will just change your life overall. So please do pick it up if you have not read Sophie Lark. You got to get on that. Now I'm going to deviate a little bit here with my 9th book in my top 10 recommendation. That is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. So this is so different than anything else I have read, and I think that's why I had to put it on this list, was because it stood out to me to such an extent due to that. It's an epistolary book, so you can read this really, really quickly because of how short some of the chapters are, because they are just little diary entries. But this follows the wife of one of the wives of Dracula and kind of her life with Dracula and the other people that he brings into their relationship. Really unique. It's unlike anything I ever read, and it is one of my favorite books. I think I could reread this a million times and just find more and more things that I absolutely adore about it. I also really just love the way that it kind of read like poetry and like prose in that sense, because it is just such a beautifully written book. Like, you could just sit there and read it and analyze it and highlight it to the end of days. Like, it is absolutely gorgeous. I didn't realize how much I was going to love this because of how much I love poetry and I love kind of gothic vampiric romances. This just really spoke to me, and so I think if you're looking for something a little bit different to try, please do check this out, because I love the absolute shit out of it, and I really think you guys will too. And last but not least, I had a couple of different small town romances that I wanted to recommend as my recommendation for my top 10, and it took me a little second to kind of decide on what it would be. I kept going back and forth between Corinne Michaels and Macaulay Smeltzer, but I ended up deciding on Macaulay because this book I'm about to recommend to you guys is one that after I finished it, I kept talking about and kept raving about and kept thinking about, and that is going to be The Confidence of Wildflowers by Macaulay Smeltzer. Please do know that there are a lot of trigger warnings for this duet. Do check out my Goodreads review for that. There is a huge trigger in this that I do consider to be a huge spoiler for the duet. However, if death of a loved one is a trigger for you, please be aware of that before you do go into this duet, because death of a loved one is a massive, massive trigger. And if you want to know what that death is, you can see it in my Goodreads review. It is in the spoiler section of that. Now, another trigger for this series is also the fact that our main character was sexually assaulted by her father when she was a child. Her father is now dead, but she still very much deals with the trauma of that and with nightmares. So if that is also a trigger for you, please do know, because she still has on-page nightmares and on-page PTSD with dealing with that. So trigger warnings, FYI. So in this duet, you're following Salem. She's 18 years old. She's just graduated high school and she doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. She is just living at home as like a gap year currently, when she has a new neighbor move next door, and that is Thea Holmes. Now Thea is 31. He owns his own landscaping company, and he is a divorced single dad, and he switches off every other weekend with his ex-wife to look after his little son. Thea ends up hiring Salem as his nanny, and it is Thea and Salem's romance as they kind of blossom. Like I said, there's a massive age gap. Salem is 18, Thea is 31, and it's kind of, you know, this connection and this romance they end up forming. Salem does have a boyfriend when the book series does start off. Please do be aware of that. So there is technically some emotional cheating that does go on with this as well. But it is one of my favorite small town romances that I have read. If you love small town romances and age gaps, please do check this out. I absolutely devoured this book so quickly and just read the absolute shit out of it. It was so much fun, so amazing. I was obsessed with this book for ages after I read it. This was my very first time reading from Macaulay, and I absolutely just fell in love with her writing. She quickly became one of my favorite authors after I read this, and I just highly, highly recommend it. And so yeah, that is going to be my top 10 books of 2022. This was a very hard list to do, but I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you guys did enjoy this video, please slap button down below. If you want to see more of me, please go to my channel, and don't forget to check me out over on TikTok and Instagram. And until next time, thanks a bunch everyone. Bye-bye.